So if you haven't heard me talk about prepdish.com, then this might be the first Hey Girl episode you've ever listened to. Here's what you need to know. Life is full. I don't care if you're a mom, an empty nester, you got littles. It's just the nature of our calendars, the schedules, all the things. And so I'll be totally honest, we have been eating so much healthier these days, and I am feeling way better than I did even a month ago. And so I want to encourage all of my listeners, maybe you're in that place where you're like, okay, I need to eat healthier. Maybe you've been eating really healthy, but you're like, the whole process is just really overwhelming, from planning meals to figuring out what to buy at the grocery store, to recipes, to preparation. I'm telling you, prepdish.com is totally here to help. If you go to prepdish.com/heygirl, you're gonna get a free trial. So here's the thing, it's free. Why not give it a try? Once you sign up, they're gonna send you an entire week's worth of recipes, a whole meal plan. You can do paleo, you can do gluten-free. It's gonna give you the shopping list. It's gonna give you all of the steps for preparation. It literally is going to take all of the hard brain space that we need for other things out of the mix. And so prepdish.com/heygirl, absolutely give it a try. I am telling you, just eating healthier for the last month has cleared up so much of the fog in my brain, and makes us do everything better. So give it a try. Let me know what you think. Go to prepdish.com/heygirl for your 2-week free trial.
Hey girls, and welcome to season 3 of the Hey Girl podcast with my mom, Bethany Needham. Each week, guests will share their amazing stories of following Jesus on all kinds of journeys. I hope their stories inspire you to run your race in your place. Thank you so much for listening.
Hey girls, in this week's episode, I get to introduce you to Anna Mullen. So Anna is a girl that I have kind of seen from sort of a distance, but our paths have crossed a lot, especially through Camp Berea, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about before. It's a place my husband works. My kids absolutely love their time at camp, and I get to spend some really special moments there this past summer. So we have a love for Berea. It's been amazing over the years to see Anna there. That's where I really got to witness her servant's heart, and just, I don't know, there is a sweetness about Anna that you just can't miss when you meet her. And it's been really neat to touch base with her at different points during the year and hear about what God's been doing. But I was pumped when she came and said hey to me this summer and told me this story. And I'm not going to give it all away because we'll talk about it in the interview, but it was just honestly the sweetest conversation. And I just looked at her, I was like, Anna, do you want to come on the podcast? Because I would love to interview you and hear your story. And so she did. Not only did she come on, but she made the long trek all the way to my house. We were able to do this interview in person, which is just always my favorite. I love sitting down with friends. And true confessions, there is the interview, and then we continued to just sit and talk and share long after the interview was over. So I'm excited for you to hear Anna's story. I know that you'll feel so encouraged by it. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to my new friend, Anna Mullen. Okay, girls, I have a guest with me. I'm pretty darn excited for her because I don't know a lot of your story, Anna. And As much as I love hearing stories of ones that I kind of had a gist of, what it was, brand new guests are fun for me because it's so much easier for me to put myself in that place as a listener, because I legitimately am a first-time listener. But first, I'll let you say, hey.
Hey, guys, or girls, I should say. Hey, girls.
They're both. You've determined that both exist, so it's fine. It works either way. So, Anna, our connection, which I usually try and weave it together, would be Berea.
Yes.
So we've talked about Simply Beautiful before, and that is now a conference that Berea does. But Berea is, well, it's much bigger than a camp. It's a conference center. They do regional ministry here in New England. I'm totally biased towards it because my husband's on staff. But truthfully, I just think they do an amazing work. And so how long have you served?
I started going to Berea as a family camper when I was 4 years old. And so I was a camper for, I think, 15 years. And then I joined full-time summer staff as a counselor the summer after my sophomore year of college and did 3 years full-time counseling. The last year I did the Campbell Discipleship Program as the mentor for that. So yeah, it was honestly the coolest job. I loved it. And I still volunteer as much as I can, and big fan.
I was not expecting it to go all the way back to 4 years old.
Yeah, it was awesome. A big part of my life.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah.
Goodness. Well, I feel like I'm just excited to dig in. So are you ready?
I hope so.
Okay. Tell us some of your story.
Well, I grew up in Maryland, outside of D.C. in the suburbs, in a little farm town. And I have 3 brothers. And so I grew up in a family of 4 kids, and we were all really close in age. So we were all really close together, which was wonderful. But yeah, my parents were both on the worship team, so we were at church a lot. Grew up very much in the church. And I liked going to church most of the time. Sometimes I did not. But I really just didn't have a great perception of who God was growing up. It was a very legalistic view. And honestly, looking back on my life, specifically looking back on my middle school self, I was a hardcore Pharisee. I was I'm going to learn all the rules and I'm going to follow them so well. And everybody else has to follow the rules. And if they don't follow the rules, then they're going to hell. It was very black and white. And I had no concept of grace and no concept of real forgiveness, honestly. And so I just had this very, very legalistic and negative perception of God, which then kind of transferred into my view of myself and everyone around me, because everybody had to fit into the box of these are the rules and you have to do them. And then as I got into middle school, specifically 7th grade, had a really big falling out with my closest friend that ended very badly, as they often do at that age. And it turned very negative very fast. She came from a very difficult home life. And so a lot of what I was going through and what she was going through just kind of multiplied. And so it began with bullying at school, just things as simple as saying I wasn't allowed to sit with them at lunch anymore. And if I was talking to a friend, she'd come and stand in between the two of us and talk to the friend instead so that I couldn't. And this was, the early days of cyberbullying, because we didn't have Facebook or Instagram, but she would send me emails every day that were just you're awful and I hate you and you're unlovable and just all kinds of kind of aggressive things. And I was not faultless. I definitely said a lot of things I shouldn't have said as well. But it really impacted me significantly, because then I didn't have any friends anymore at school and just kind of was hearing these voices of you're unworthy, you are unlovable, you are not good enough over and over and over again. And at the same time, didn't really have a support system anywhere. Didn't have really close friends at church. The close friends I did have at church, one of them had just left our church and one of them was going through another really difficult point in her life and wasn't really around. So it didn't have really any supports there. My dad was working in a different state than we lived in, so he wasn't really home a lot. And my mom didn't really know how to handle what I was going through or really the depth and extent of what was going on. So there was just no break for me in that. And so I got really depressed, and depression and anxiety run in my family on both sides. So it was kind of inevitable, but it was my first real experience with it. I think that was January was when it started, and it just continued and escalated all the way until May. And somewhere along the way, I remember thinking things are just not getting better and I don't know how to make things get better. And so I started turning to self-harming, because it was I need somebody to see that there's a problem. And I remember starting cutting, and I told one friend who lived really far away, but she would call me on the phone, and she was the only person I told. And she, didn't really say anything much about it, so I figured it wasn't a big deal. So that just became like my coping mechanism. And I just kept regressing, getting worse and worse, until finally in May, when, I'm 12 years old, but had pretty much no hope at that point. As far as I could see, things were just going to keep getting worse. And my parents sent me to a youth retreat just for a weekend. And that retreat, the whole topic was on love and on God's love for us. And as someone who grew up in the church, I was like, yeah, I know, God loves me. Like, I can sing the song, it's fine. But it was the first time I really understood the depth of God's love for me and how real and how significant it was. And at a time in my life when it felt like nobody loved me, to see how deeply and how completely God loved me. And that love did not depend on my actions or on my ability to follow his rules, but just it was completely free as a result of his grace. It changed my life. And so in that moment, I remember distinctly walking up to the front of the auditorium in that building and just telling my youth leaders, like, I want to give my life to God. And so I was 12, and it was like the first weekend of May 2012. But yeah, I knew that I needed God to change my life. Whatever I was doing wasn't working. And so that was when I really kind of went from having this legalistic perception of God to having an actual relationship with God. But obviously, like, a lot of things in my life hadn't changed other than that. It still took a long time for me to understand, what does it look like to have a relationship with God, and how do you spend time with a God that you can't see, and all kinds of things like that. And so went through high school and college, and I don't think it was really until my sophomore year of college that I developed a really solid relationship with God. And that came through a lot of other struggles and wrestlings and just really wonderful people that came alongside me and were willing to mentor and disciple me and teach me how to just pursue God above all else.
I was actually thinking, when you mentioned that, that going from making that decision to having a relationship with God, and what does that practically look like?
Yeah.
And for you did mention people in your life, but give me a picture maybe of how did it shift in your everyday, like, things that just changed, and the steps or decisions rather that you made that were that decision towards having a deeper relationship.
Well, I think the first decision, and the decision that really changed everything, was a decision of surrender instead of just constantly trying. I'm very independent and I'm very stubborn, and I just want to do everything myself.
Yeah.
And so it was the first time that I really just kind of had to let go and say, like, God, everything that I've tried to do has made things worse. And so I'm giving it all to you. And he did honestly, like, blow my mind a little bit with how he kind of took care of some of those things by providing friendships that I would not have expected from really random situations. Gave me a really strong Christian friend at school, which was really a blessing and kind of unheard of. And even got the friend that I had the big falling out with, her mom ended up putting her in counseling, and she ended up apologizing to me for a lot of what had happened. And those are things that definitely were just by God's grace that those even happened. But then practically, as far as, like, what did it look like from there on pursuing that personal relationship with God, a lot of it came down to daily quiet time, which is such like a Christianese phrase to say, but I knew that I needed to be spending that time with God every single day. And I just had no idea what that was supposed to look like or how to make that a priority. Because all throughout high school, I was like, yeah, I need to read my Bible and I need to pray. But I just was so busy, and I would let myself get so busy that I didn't make time for it. It was like I would go months without reading my Bible and not even notice. And so when I got into college, I scheduled it into my day, where it was like, okay, I have classes from 8 until 11, and then I have a break for an hour and a half, and then I have classes. And so I would make sure an hour of that break, this is my time with God every single day. Yeah, and sometimes I call it my Jesus dates. But I had a lot of people come, that's kind of the mentorship of it, people who were willing to say, like, hey, here's something that you can do during that quiet time. Because, like, I knew I was supposed to have them, but I didn't know what you were supposed to do during that time. And so there's actually a woman from family camp my sophomore year sent me a devotional at college because I was kind of struggling in my faith. And so she sent me a care package, and that was one of the things in there. So I started going through that book daily, and then gradually increased in what I was doing. And so then I suddenly was doing like 4 devotional books every day, and added in a couple different specific Bible studies, and just kind of learned of prayer journaling, and a lot of those, what do you do during a quiet time? Just kind of figured it out.
Random question, but do you have any that stand out in your mind that are like your favorites?
Yes. Experiencing God Day by Day by Henry Blackaby.
Yeah.
That is like my all-time favorite. I would recommend
It's
that.
on my shelf somewhere, but
Honestly, it might be.
maybe it might be in one of my closed shelves, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that I would recommend that honestly to anybody. I like Jesus Calling a lot by Sarah Young. That one's kind of, some people really like it, some people really don't, because it's kind of weird. It's like written from Jesus' perspective.
Yeah.
So some people don't like that aspect, but
Wait, you mean it's controversial?
maybe a little.
edit. No, just kidding.
Yeah. So I love the Blackaby one, but yeah, I go through those two every day, and then a couple other ones that are hit or miss.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
You were mentioning your sophomore year of college.
Yes.
That was a challenging
Yes.
year. You don't have to go into
Yeah.
it, but I'm nosy.
Yeah.
It's part of being an interviewer.
I don't mind.
Walk me through a little, like what created more challenge in that year. And obviously you mentioned that was a year you grew spiritually, which we all hate to admit, right? That the trial is where we grow.
Yeah.
But talk us through a little bit about that year.
Yeah, it's funny because I can look back to any year that was really difficult for me. It starts with a major shift of control where something comes up that God wants me to release and I just don't want to release it, and it becomes a big struggle and then ends up being really growing, but it's really painful first. That was a year of release and growth and pain. And the beginning of that year, I'd been dating a guy for about 2 years, and God just really convicted me, you need to end this relationship. And I knew it, and I just really didn't want to. And so I kept putting it off and just was not willing to release that. But finally did, and then very shortly after, also was convicted that I needed to change my major, which I had been convinced since I was in elementary school that I was going to be a kindergarten teacher. And I'd gone and I'd interned with a kindergarten class for a year. I'd taught preschool for a long time. I had already finished 2 years of elementary education classes at college, and then just really felt like this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. But I didn't feel any guidance of, oh, here's what you should be doing. Instead, it was just, you shouldn't be doing this anymore. And so I just had no concept of, where is my life going? I'm a very type A planner naturally, which God has totally been breaking that down in me over the past few years. But I was very, in 6th grade, I decided I'm going to Grove City College. I'm majoring in elementary education. I'm going to go back to Montgomery County and work for 5 years as a teacher. But I'm going to marry a guy that I met in college, dated for 4 years. And then I'm going to retire to be a stay-at-home mom with our 4 to 6 children while he works. So I literally had this all planned out and did everything in that plan. And this was the year where God was just like, you don't get to make those plans.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
You are my daughter.
So funny.
That's fantastic.
I call it my sandcastle because I just put so much time and so many years into building it, and then God was just like, that's not my kingdom. That's your castle. And so, I literally had to change my major, and I had no concept of what I was changing it to. I had broken up with this guy that I thought I was going to marry, and then the whole concept of what do I even change my major to? How do I go about finding a different career? I ended up changing my major twice because I had no idea what I was doing. And as a result of all of this change and unknown, I have a naturally addictive tendency personality. And so since I wasn't cutting anymore because I had worked on that and gotten through that addiction, I turned to an eating disorder instead. And so at the beginning of my sophomore year, I started just making myself throw up because that was the one thing I could control. Was I can't change the fact that I have to switch my major or that I have to break up with this guy, but I can change whether or not this food stays down. And so that was throughout the whole first semester of my sophomore year. And luckily I did have a mentor in college who noticed very quickly, surprisingly, that I was losing weight. And so she kind of confronted me and asked if I would go to counseling, which we had free counseling at my school, which I took full advantage of. And
As you should.
Yes. Oh, I would recommend to anyone. Free Christian counseling, go for it. But so I decided to go back to counseling and worked through that. Obviously had to kind of come to grips with, why is this a problem? What am I not surrendering? What am I trying to control? And how do I go about that in a way that's healthy? And so, kind of had to come to grips with all of that, which produced just a lot of growth in the end. But it was very difficult.
I think there's something powerful even in you mentioned it, but recognizing the fact that this had to do with control. I think how that manifests can look different for a lot of people. And I think we can easily get distracted or caught up in the actual, I'll call it the plant versus the root.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, well,
Yeah.
you know, alcohol or eating disorder, whatever it is, like they need to take care of that issue. And even though, yes, absolutely, like these things can get out of hand and be, eating disorders are out of hand, but alcohol, over consuming, things like that, you have to dig deeper than that. When you go beyond not just what are you doing, but like you said, why am I doing this? To me, I see so much like true actual healing come of that. But I love the fact that you mentioned counseling, because I am a huge proponent of counseling. And I will say to this day that I probably think everybody. I honestly
think everyone should go to counseling.
Yeah. I used to say anybody in full-time ministry, it should be mandated.
Yes.
But I've come to grips with, you don't need to be in full-time ministry. Like, everyone should. Now, granted, there's not enough counselors in the world for that. But
at least for a season of life to just kind of process, because there's so much that we just don't know how to process.
And you don't even know. Like, there's some things where you talk through, and I see a counselor on a semi-regular, like I've gone through, you mentioned depression, anxiety. These are things that I've wrestled in dark seasons. I've seen a counselor very regularly. But like right now, you know, I'm actually doing really well and I'm feeling good. And so I see her maybe once every 3 months or so. But I can't tell you the number of times I've sat with her and she'll ask me some question about like a story in my life or something. And I'll think nothing of it. And then by the end, I'm like, oh my word.
Yeah.
Like, this explains so much of why I do this. Like you said, you know, control, eating disorders are such a, for girls and guys, I think there's a misconception that this is like a girl's issue, is one of those things that can easily be turned to as I just need control. Cutting, a very, very similar. And I mean, obviously heartbreaking how much that goes on right now, but kids that just feel like everything around them is out of control and they're just clinging for something. I also thought it was really powerful and insightful to hear you say when you first started cutting that you wanted somebody to see that like something's really wrong. Maybe you can't necessarily like go back right to that moment, but I'm wondering what keeps us, and I say us because I think this is natural, from not wanting to just ask for help, like from I just want you to see it in me without me having to like break down and beg you to help me.
I think a lot of it comes down to, for me at least, a fear of rejection. Because it's like, if I come to you with this problem and you don't help me, then that means like you either don't see me enough to know that this is like really a problem, or you don't care enough about me to try to fix it or to try to help in some way. And so there was like, if I bring it to someone and they don't do anything, then that just like confirms all these fears that I'm not worthy, I'm not wanted, I'm not, like all of those things that just like were completely consuming my heart. And there's still those fears, honestly. Like, I can't even pretend like this was just 10 years ago. That's still now a problem sometimes, where it's so hard to ask for help from anyone because you're just that fear of what if they don't care enough, or what if they don't see me, you know?
Man, I was thinking as you were saying that, how not even just asking for help, but how much of life that we wrestle with that, with the putting ourselves in a vulnerable position to someone else, and that fear of rejection. So if I could just keep myself, you know, at a safe distance, you know, if you approach me, that's different. Like you're already kind of stepping in. So.
And I'm one of those, I just naturally perceive rejection so easily. And even if there's no rejection at all, like intended by the other person, I perceive it so quickly. And so that makes it even harder for me to go to someone with a help or a need, because I naturally feel rejected. Yeah, it makes it so hard when I'm like, I know it would be beneficial for me if this person were to do this thing for me, but I can't ask them to do it for me because I can't handle that fear. So that's kind of what just turns you into all these other addictions or false reliances, things that we just turn to for quick fixes that don't end up fixing our problems.
No, it's very
Which is like
true.
the story of my life in a sentence. unfortunately, but we're working on it.
I'm trying to shift the narrative here, but
it's a growing process.
Yeah, well, aren't we all, though? Really. So then tell me, life right now.
Yeah.
It's not your sophomore year of college anymore.
Nope.
So where does God have you?
Oh, man. Honestly, this past year has been the most difficult and growing year of my life. And I feel like I've honestly grown more in this past year than, like, I don't want to say the whole 4 years of college, because I definitely grew a lot in college as well, but it has just been really challenging, and ties into that whole concept of, like, when God asks me to let go of something. This year was a lot of God just trying to show me that he is enough. And in order for him to show me that, he had to take away everything else that I was holding on to.
Yeah.
I graduated in May 2017, and originally I ended up graduating with a degree in psychology, and so I was planning on going to be a clinical psychologist. So I was going to go to grad school. I only applied to one grad school, and I got into a doctoral program and was going to be a clinical psychologist with concentrations in marriage and family therapy and child development, because my goal was to be a marriage and family therapist. And so I was completely prepared to go to grad school after I graduated, and once again, that ache of my heart of just God saying, this isn't what I have for you. And so in March of my senior year, right after I got the acceptance call from the grad school, it was the week after, I had this weekend where I was just alone at school. My friends had gone away for the weekend, and my parents were not answering their phones, and I just had nobody to talk to, but I felt just this overwhelming sense of this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. I spent the weekend just kind of wrestling through it with God and praying about it. And by the end of the weekend was very strongly confirmed that this was not what I'm supposed to be doing. So I called the grad school and said, sorry, I'm not coming. And then was like, well, God, what do you have for me? Because I'm literally graduating college with no backup plan. I didn't look into careers or anything because I was planning on being in grad school for another 5 years. And then an opportunity came to me from multiple different sources of, there's this job opening, it's your dream job, you should apply for it. And so I did, and went through a 6-month application process, all the interviews, and was pretty much told, like, along the way, you're gonna make it, like, you're in the final few people we're considering, and just was really convinced that this is where I was gonna end up. And so I was really excited about it, and had kind of put my trust in this was going to be my life, and made it all the way until July, last week of July, and was told that they decided not to give the position to anybody. Oh. So yeah, that was really hard. And so then again, I had no backup plan, and I was working at camp that summer with the Camp Discipleship program, and just had no time to look for a job because I was full time with these kids 24/7. I literally had 2 weeks to just kind of look for a job online. I had no idea what I was looking for. I didn't know what to go into, but I knew that I loved camp counseling. And so I decided to look for Christian ministry jobs in New England, because I love New England. Even though I'm not from here, I'm a New Englander at heart.
I love it.
Yeah, so ever since I was little...
We will accept you as our own.
Well, I appreciate that. Ever since I was really little, I just wanted to live in New Hampshire. And so I moved back home after camp for 2 weeks before I found a job up here. And literally... I found the job on Monday, applied on Tuesday, was offered it by Thursday, and moved up, I think, Saturday, and started working Sunday. Like, it was unreal how fast it was. I moved 500 miles away from my family up to New Hampshire by myself, and I actually moved up with the guy that I was dating at the time, and we'd been dating for about 3 years. Started the job, and the job, it's kind of hard to describe, but basically traveled all over New England, doing ministry work at Christian schools across New England. And so I thought, oh, that's right up my alley. That'll be great. But it was honestly the most difficult job I've ever done in my life. Moving 500 miles away from my family and friends, and then living in a job where I literally traveled to a different state almost every single week, which is really hard. I didn't have a community. I couldn't put down roots. There was no way to really connect with people. Yeah. Because I was always gone. And then when I wasn't working, we were off for long periods of time, but I was off at times when everyone else would be working, so I couldn't make friends that way either. So I was painfully lonely. Like, it was unreal. I've never been that lonely in my life, and I just had so much free time and nothing to do with it. And as a type A personality who was so used to college, where I worked 20 hours a week and took 22 credits a semester, like, was used to just going, and then suddenly had nothing but free time and no one to spend it with. And so that was just a really, really difficult situation, and I ended up really not enjoying the work that I was doing. Had a really difficult time just as a whole with that job. I don't know, like I felt like God had brought me here, but I also felt like I was in the wrong place. Yeah. And I had no idea how to bring those two things together because it seemed like they were in so much contradiction to one another, but at the same time, like I felt them both so strongly of just like God clearly brought me here, but I am clearly drowning. Like I'm just struggling to live at this point. And again, with like the depression and anxiety, I had been in counseling all throughout college. I had been on antidepressants for all 4 years, and I decided to go off of antidepressants this past August. So it's been a little over a year now. And so suddenly not having medication, not having a support system, not having any form of counseling or therapy, and not having family or friends around me in a new place with a new job that I wasn't enjoying, it honestly it felt like I was drowning all the time. And so that was incredibly difficult. And in the midst of this all, me and my boyfriend broke up. And so even that little bit of support that I kind of had from him was just gone. Like, I just can't even describe some of the depths of those loneliness. Yeah, I can remember a few like very specific moments where it was just like an emptiness. But in those moments, God showed up in such crazy ways that I remember like sitting on a bed in Syracuse, New York at this random people's house, and they were so wonderful, but I was just alone in my room, and I remember just crying and like God's presence being so crazy. Like I could not deny that he was just like with me in that moment, and I just kept feeling like he was just saying like I have to be enough. I have to be completely and totally enough for you. And so just went through a lot of those moments of just complete loneliness and depression and just feeling like I wasn't, like I had no purpose. That, you know, that same fear of you're not wanted, no one cares about you, because there wasn't really anybody in my life at that point that did, or that showed it very, very well. And so then moved from that point, finally got to February of this past year, decided to quit because it was just so difficult. I really was not enjoying it. I was really struggling. And at the same time, me and the boyfriend decided to get back together. Wasn't exactly the best idea. Did not end well, but kind of was just trying to hold on to something again, holding onto that control. And so I quit my job. Now I was unemployed and living 500 miles away from my family. And so I was unemployed for 2 months, a little over 2 months, and was still living in the house with the people that I had worked with when I was working at that job. Which was, incredibly awkward, very difficult, very, very, very lonely. I cannot even describe the amount of, like, not feeling at home when you're at home that I felt during, honestly, that whole 8 months or 6 months, however long it was, that I was living there. And so that was incredibly difficult. So I started kind of just couch hopping and was like, I just need to not be here. I don't have a job anymore. So like, why am I even here? So then I kind of became homeless and was just floating from different people's houses. I stayed at camp a lot. I was kind of anywhere that people would let me be because there was no home for me. Couldn't really go home to Maryland. That was a little too far away. So just kind of couch hopped for a couple months. And then in April, I got a phone call from a woman that I went to church with who was the principal of a Christian school. And she called me up and said, a teacher like had complications with her pregnancy, can't come back for the rest of the year. Can you finish out the year? So it's like 2.5 months still left in the school year. And it's 6th grade English and high school math. And I literally like did elementary education in college. I had no experience with middle school or high school. I barely remember anything from math. Like I was not prepared at all for this. And
I'll give him the foundations again. How about that?
This was one of those like Moses moments where you're like, but Lord, I can't speak. And so I was just like, but Lord, I can't do math.
I can't divide.
Yeah, but I needed a job so badly that I was just like, all right, like this is my opportunity. This is what I'm going to do. And so I started teaching there and I really, really enjoyed it, honestly. Like it was such a blessing and I loved being there. And at the same time, there was a family from family camp that just started reaching out to me a lot. My mom had called their mom up and was like, my daughter is having a breakdown. Can you please go save her? Just one of those moments where I wish I could have had the nerve to ask for help. Unfortunately, it took me getting pretty low for her to see that and notice and to kind of take care of me even from so far away. But she called up this woman, and I'm going to call her Mama C because I'm going to talk about Mama C for a little bit. And so Mama C called me and said, we're about to leave for Europe, but you need to come over to our house right now. And I was like, okay. So I drove over to their house, and she gave me a key to their house, and she was like, we're going to be gone for 2 weeks. Literally, the house is yours. Eat anything in the fridge. We have a kayak. We live on a river. Like, go on the river. You can sleep in any bed. I made all the beds. Like, whatever you want to do. The house is just yours. And so as a person who did not feel like I had a home, didn't feel like I was welcome anywhere, to have a place where I could just be and not have to worry about if I was offending anybody with my presence or like being a burden to anyone was such a huge blessing. And then when they came back from Europe, they kept inviting me over, and they were like, oh, we're having a campfire tonight. Like, please come over. Or tonight's scrapbooking night if you want to come over. And for Mother's Day, they invited me over because I couldn't go home with my mom. And every time I came over, they would say, you know, if you want to live here, you can live here. I just didn't know how that would work because they didn't have an extra bedroom or anything. At the end of May, I was just like, can I please live with you? And so I literally flew home for Memorial Day weekend to be with my family. And in the time that it took me to fly home and spend the weekend and fly back, they had converted their basement into like a living room, bedroom, like decorated it. Like, it's so cute. And they framed a picture of my family and put it in the room, and they helped me pack. And
Mama C.
Yeah, she's honestly, they're such selfless and wonderful people, and I'm so blessed to live with them. But yeah, so now I had this job, and I was living with this family, and finally, like, for the first time in honestly so long, felt like I was at home somewhere. And then I got offered this new job, full-time, literally, like, I finished working at the school on the 8th of June, and then on the 10th of June was my first day starting this new job, which is, am I allowed to say where I work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
I mean, they might stalk you, but
so I'm a children's ministry associate at Manchester Christian Church in Manchester, New Hampshire. Yeah. And so that job, honestly, it was a complete godsend. Someone, honestly, actually it was Alyssa Bell from Berea called me and said, you need to apply for this job. It's like perfect for you. And at first, because I still had these control issues, I was like, that's not what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to do something different. And it took a couple times before I finally was like, all right, I'll apply for it. And it just, the way that it came together was so incredible. And so I finished my job teaching on the 8th and then started working at MCC on the 10th. And the day that I started working at MCC, me and the boyfriend broke up for real. I'm like, forever and ever, no more. Forever and ever. And at first, honestly, like, that was excruciatingly difficult because even though it was wonderful that I had just moved in with this family and I was so excited about this new job, within a 2-week span, I was suddenly moving in with a new family that, even though they're great, like, I barely knew them at the time. I was starting a new job that I didn't really know anything about and had never even been to the church for a service or anything before I started working there. Like, literally was just like, all right,
that's gutsy.
We're going to just start working. And then was no longer dating this guy that I'd been dating for 3 years and, like, was convinced I was going to marry. Like, he'd already asked my dad's permission to marry me. Like, it was really serious. And so to go through all of that change in such a short amount of time, again, without really any support system or any accountability, any mentors, like, there was not really a strong foundation underneath me, and I hit rock bottom. It was probably the lowest I've ever been, and it was so difficult for that first day. I remember it was my first day at work that we broke up, and I remember going in to a meeting with my boss, and she was just trying to have a conversation with me, and I was like, I'm sorry, I have to stop you. I'm really emotional right now. And I just explained to her what had happened. I broke down sobbing, and she was wonderful and, like, talked through it with me and prayed with me. And that was the first moment where I realized, like, I'm in the right job. If my boss is willing to take the time to care about me on this level. So I cried with her, and then my lunch break, I spent the whole lunch break on the phone with my friend from college, just sobbing to her. And it was the first time in my life where I've ever actually felt like I needed to tell people I needed help. But I was so impressed with just the people that came into my life in that moment and were just willing to say, like, you need to be broken right now. Like, that's okay that you're hurting. I would be shocked if you weren't hurting. And I kept saying, like, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. And they'd be like, no, like, honestly cry, because you should be crying right now. This is hard. And I remember my friend telling me, like, before she hung up the phone, you need to go run. And when you go home, just go for a run and process. So that's exactly what I did. I went home and went for, I think I probably ran like 7 miles, which I do run a little bit, but I just ran that day. And as I was running, I was trying to think of, honestly, this is how I ended up here, guys. I was thinking, what would I say if I was on Hey Girl talking about this experience? Because, yeah, like, when you're going through something hard, you just focus so much on the hard thing. And I was like, okay, where's the redemption in this? Where's the growth in this? So I started thinking about how I would talk about it if I was on Hey Girl. And I just started noticing all of the things that God had brought into my life in that season. And so I started focusing on the fact that he brought me into a home with a family. Like, I'd been living in this house where I felt so unwanted and so just uncomfortable. And I was living there by myself by the end of it because everyone else had left for different reasons. And so I was completely living alone for a while, which, imagining if I had gone through all of this living in a house by myself alone where I already felt really uncomfortable, it would have been awful. The fact that he brought me into this home with this family, and the fact that he had just given me this new job that I was excited about, that gave me like a reason to get out of bed, and he gave me coworkers and a boss that cared so much about me and that were willing to check in with me and see how I was doing, and that he gave me a friend who was willing to spend an hour on the phone with me while I cried. Even my family, my parents both reached out to me and just reminded me that they thought I was strong, and just things like that I wouldn't have expected. And seeing just all the ways that God had brought community around me kind of to prepare for that, just gave me so much hope of, like, I can rest in the truth that he's going to protect me and provide for me, and that I'm secure in him, because like he knew this was going to happen, and he was building all of this security around me. And I don't know, sometimes it can feel like God is so far away, but in that moment I just felt like he was holding me completely, and it was honestly, it was just the biggest blessing. By the end of that run, like, I was completely fine, and I was just like, this is good. Like, I'm gonna be okay, and I'm gonna grow through this. And I left that run like excited about all the change that was going on, and excited about what was coming next, because if I serve and follow a God that was preparing that so far in advance, what is he still preparing? What is he still going to do? And so over these past few months, like, I went from the lowest low that I've ever experienced. It's funny because it was only 24 hours, honestly, from when we broke up until that run. But those 24 hours, man, like, it was awful.
It feel long.
Yeah, it felt pretty heavy. But from then on, like, I honestly, as someone who suffered with depression and anxiety my whole life, I've never gone longer than a few weeks without having some symptoms of depression. And I went over a month. It was a month and a half before I felt any symptoms. And that was just incredible to go from such a low to being completely okay for so long. And even now, when I've had a couple depressive episodes since then, but I'm like able to cope with them so much more healthily than ever before. And I'm seeing so much of God's provision and so much growth through this whole experience. And so it's crazy to look back on it, because in the past 4 years, like, I've had 4 different jobs. I think I moved 4 different times, went through like a serious breakup, and like was kind of borderline homeless for a while, and all these crazy things. But I can look back and still see God just holding me through all of it and carrying me through some really difficult things.
I love the healing that God brought from you being on an imaginary episode of Hey Girl.
Yeah.
And that we're sitting here now in a real episode being like, so really my healing came in the fake episode?
Yeah.
This is where I just get to talk about it.
I kind of felt like such a dork doing that, but it helped so much.
See, I'm sitting here like, that's incredible, and I should do that. I need to put myself on Hey Girl as I am out and about and process things. Yes, exactly. Gosh, I'm excited for you. I don't know. I love these stories of just hearing God moving and showing up and provision and all these things you were saying. And just, it's not without hardship. Like, you know, breakups of 3-year relationships are not easy whatsoever. Not easy. But to be here, sitting here now and be like, you know what? I'm okay. Like, God did show up. And whatever that thing in our life, I feel like a lot of us have that at different points where we may not want to say it out loud, but there's those things that like, well, I would be fine except like if this happened, you know. Yeah.
And I think that's when I really realized, like, when I was a CDP mentor, did a whole series on like having a soft heart or a hard heart. And we talked about like our hearts are like Play-Doh. Do you want your heart to be soft and pliable in God's hands, or do you have like a rock and he can't really move it or shape it? And I realized that I had like a soft and pliable heart, but I had like rocks in there where it's like, okay, you can move and change all of these things in my life except these. Like, I still want to hold on to these things. I still want control of these things. And relationships were like my number one, like, I don't want you to touch that. Like, I'm in control of that. And I think that was part of the reason why, first of all, it was so hard, but also part of the reason why God really had to break it down very, very abruptly in a very difficult situation, because it was the rock in the center of my heart that I could not break on my own. And so God just really had to break my heart so that he could move me.
You're talking my language. I'm a visual learner. So when you start painting these like pictures, I'm like, yes.
I wish I had some Play-Doh right now.
The Play-Doh, the rocks.
Yeah.
I'm following you. Oh, well, this has been such a gift. I love the ones that are just like, I feel like this is going to be an encouragement to people. I'm excited for the people who know you that get to hear your story.
Yeah, I'm
That's
kinda
always
nervous.
I know it is a little weird. I will say that one of the funniest things that happens to me since starting the podcast is meeting someone that I think I'm meeting for the first time, but has listened to Hey Girl, and then them being like, "Oh, I know that about your life," like whatever, and I was like, "Oh yeah, it's not just me." Talking into a microphone, like people have heard these stories. So no, I think it's going to be awesome. It'll be great. But before I let you go, I do have to ask you one more question.
Oh boy.
Hopefully, since it's the only one I repeat every single time, you're well prepared. But I just want to know what's superficial about you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is so difficult. I think if I had to pick one, it is that I take way, way, way too many pictures. And then I have to go through and, like, if I have, like, 5 billion pictures of the exact same moment, I will literally go through every single one of them and see which one I like my face in the best and put that one on social media. So, like, people do, like, I'll be like, can you please take a picture of me? And people will do, like, literally 50 pictures. And I will sit there and zoom in and figure out which one I like the most. And if it's, like, a group picture, I pick the one where I like my face the best. Because, like,
forget the rest
like that.
of y'all.
Yeah. Sometimes, like, if someone looks really bad, I won't put that one up. But... if everyone looks decent and I just happen to look a little bit better in one, that's the one that's going on social media.
Truthfully, I think you just confessed most people who may not want to say it aloud, but you're not alone in that. You're not alone. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic, though. Well, Anna, thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you for letting me. It was an experience.
Yay! An adventure.
Yeah.
Okay. I was almost mad at myself that I have been around Anna so many different times and had not taken the time to sit down and really hear her story until now. Because after sitting down with her, I'm like, I love this girl. And I was so impressed. Just really the word that came to mind, doesn't even sound... I mean it in a positive way, but just grit. Because as she shared about being willing to move way away from her family, and then when things not working out, being homeless for a while and having to hop from sofa to sofa, and she's a young woman. Like I weirdly, like, not that you ever want someone to go through those things, but I just felt so proud of her listening to her share how she just kept moving forward. And I know it wasn't easy for her. And she mentioned just the challenges in her own battles with depression in the midst of all of that. But gosh, when I look at her now and I think about the places that God has brought her on this journey, and just really her willingness to do the next thing, even when she didn't know what was ahead, like she just did what she had to do. And I know all of us have just been in that season. And I hope that for those of you listening that are either there or you've been there before, where all you can do is just the next thing. Like for her, I'm sure during that season of not having a home, just day by day, trying to figure out where's she going to sleep that night and all of those details. And God working in the midst. And I love her talking about how, as difficult as those seasons were, that is where God really grew her faith. And if I'm going to grab anything from the episode, I needed a reminder of that today, that in difficult seasons, when the challenges seem insurmountable sometimes, and it's just hard, that oftentimes those are the seasons that we look back on and we're like, wow, did God ever meet me and grow me in that season? And so if you're out there today and you've been listening and that's where you're at right now, I just want to encourage you. And I hope that Anna's story encouraged you, because I'm sure if you asked her in the darkest moment, she may not have been able to articulate like, yeah, this is what God's doing. But now when she's able to look back on some of those and be like, wow, these are all the ways that God showed up. And I appreciate so much that even that funny story, which I still love about her taking that run and pretending she was on the podcast. But what I loved about it was such a great exercise to be like, okay, I need to look for where God has been at work, continues to be at work, the things that he is doing, because it could be so easy to really sink in the midst of the hard things going on. But there are good things here, and I want to take time to notice them. And man, I feel like that could be a lesson for all of us. Doesn't matter where we are, taking the time to look for what God is doing, even if it feels like you're having to like dig in the dirt, but to look and even ask him, God, show me where you're at in this. So love this episode. Loved Anna. I am so excited because we already found out that we get to hang out for the next couple of weekends at Berea for their women's conference. So I just feel like today I met a friend that is going to be that friend that isn't just a podcast, like staying in touch with her and following her journey. I'm pumped. So hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening. And again, if you loved it, do us a favor, share it with your friends. Send me some messages. I love to hear the way that God works through these stories. And I love to pass them on to our guests too, because I know it means a lot to them. So let me encourage you once again, wherever God has you this week, girlfriend, run your race in your place and keep being awesome for Jesus. Bye. Hello. Can you talk in your, or just talk?
This is a house and I'm in it, and I'm sitting here on a couch and I'm holding tea and the tea is nice and warm. That's like my normal volume. I'm getting louder.
I love it.
Was that like audible?
Yes, it was.
Okay. I felt like Buddy the Elf, like I'm singing. I'm in a store and I'm singing.
Per usual, I'm just a loudmouth, so I'll sit back further and maybe it'll balance the two of us out. I have my father's loud voice. Thanks, Dad.
I'm really loud normally, but I think it's just like the calming environment that it's like, wow, let's just sit and think.
This room kind of has a calming vibe.
It does.
It's what I'm going for in here.
Very cozy.
Since this is where I work and sleep.
Yeah.
So for the Hey Girl audience that doesn't know, my studio is in my bedroom. Something like inviting complete strangers. There's been people I've met for that. I'm like, so we're going to my bedroom. Follow me.